And now we're going to our final panel discussion for gridXdays 2023. And we're talking about energy management systems from challenge to logic. We'll be back right after this quick video.
The overall home energy management systems, or HEMS, and appliance optimization systems market grew by 33% from 2021 to 2022. This is expected to climb significantly until the end of the decade. High electricity prices and relatively open electricity market mechanisms are some of the driving factors behind this trend. So what are the benefits of an energy management system? And why are they so crucial for the energy transition? What impact do cutting-edge solutions have? And what are some of the key differences and best practices in the EMS field in different markets? The experts in our last panel, EMS from challenge to logic, will dive into this topic, expanding on what shifts they foresee in the future, the difficulty of adapting to different regulation, and why dynamic pricing is so important.
Welcome back and welcome to our final session of gridXdays this year. I'm very excited to be talking about energy management systems and how they turn regulatory and market requirements into algorithmic logic. And what can we expect in the future when it comes to EMS? To discuss this very hot topic, we've got Henrik Langeland, CEO and co-founder of Enode. Henrik has extensive experience in consulting and led his previous startup to a successful exit. He founded Enode in 2020 and holds a master's degree in industrial economics from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Henrik, welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much.
Joining him, we have Christian Feisst, Vice President of Energy Management at Enphase Energy. Christian is the former founder and CEO of Greencom Networks, which was acquired by Enphase Energy. He currently serves as the Vice President Energy Management at Enphase Energy, in charge of home energy management, AI, and optimization. Christian Feisst, thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invitation, Greta.
Of course. And we have Tobias Mitter, our very own Chief Technology Officer and Managing Director. Tobias has more than 14 years of experience in various roles at BCG, IBM, and E.ON in-house management consulting. Tobias became the CTO and Managing Director of gridX earlier this year. Tobias, welcome.
Great to be here, Greta.
And finally, we have Rod Buchanan, CTO and Senior Vice President at AmpX. Rod has over 20 years of research and development experience as an aerospace engineer, and he started his career at Kinetic before moving to BAE Systems and obtaining patents in the fields of computer vision and distributed autonomous command and control. Rod, welcome to the last panel.
Hello there, thank you for having us.
Of course. All right, let's go straight into the questions. Henrik, how do you define an energy management system?
Yeah, from our perspective, an energy management system is a system that makes decisions about when energy is consumed. And in order to do that, the system takes into account the needs and preferences of the consumer on the one hand, and equally important, the needs of the energy system on the other hand. So I think the important reason for doing this is that an energy management system will generally unlock flexible energy consumption so that it can take part in balancing the grid. And of course, one of the big upsides of this is that we can then eventually have more intermittent renewable energy generation on the grid.
Thanks, Henrik. And Christian, can you elaborate a little bit more on why energy management systems are so important, particularly when we frame it within the wider context of the energy transition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Henrik already touched it to a certain extent. Essentially, the energy transition means that we are moving away from stable fossil power generation to fluctuating renewable generation. And that means a complete paradigm shift in the industry, because in the past, generation was following demand. And now, since we have fluctuating power generation, we need to change that paradigm, and demand and storage need to follow power generation, because we can't control the sun, we can't control the wind. And managing demand, managing storage capacity, that requires a smart control. That essentially is energy management. So without that, we don't have the brain to do all of that.
Thanks, Christian. And Tobias, can you tell us a bit about what you find the most interesting use cases that an energy management system enables, and how do you foresee these to maybe shift in the future?
I think we're really in an exciting time now, because we see that home energy management, for example, that has been for a long time about self-sufficiency, sometimes even only about monitoring, is now really moving into connecting also home energy management to the market. And we see this not only happening for home energy management, but for all kinds of energy management. So the combination of optimizing your local assets, like a heat pump or a battery or wall box, and in combination with price signals and also marketing your flexibility and tapping into your energy incentives, is really exciting. And that's why I believe, when you ask about where does it shift, that the future of energy management system becomes more dynamic, because the best energy management system will be that takes your individual situation into account, and the market situation and overall situation into account, and dynamically selects what's best for you. So what's the right algorithm to apply? Is it about self-sufficiency? Is it about market optimization? And pinning that down to the very individual situation, where you're living, what's your PV forecast, what's also is your EV plugged, etc. I think that is really exciting area we're moving into, where a lot of stuff that's been built over the last year comes together for the first time to create a new value proposition.
Thanks, Tobias. And Rod, can you tell us a little bit about the role that regulation plays in fostering EMS technology? Often regulation can lag a little bit behind technology. But what's the kind of relationship here with EMS?
Well, I think the interesting thing we see is that there's a great deal of consumer pull for EMS. I mean, the previous speakers have talked about dynamic pricing, novel tariffs that customers want, which enables them to reduce their energy bills. That's a key driver for EMS. But where the regulatory burden comes in is it somewhat limits the access to markets of the capability that generates. The use of EMS can unlock a vast amount of flexibility, which another way of saying that is control for the network, which has historically resided in big thermal generators. And many of the regulations are very slow to move away for that, for market access. And that's the key limit to the potential of EMS at the moment.
And Christian, can you go into a bit more detail about the relationship between regulation and consumers, of how maybe regulation such as subsidies, incentivizations, can actually change demand for EMS products?
That's a good question. I mean, our industry has a long tradition of regulation. And as always, regulation can push or can kill demand for new technologies, whether it's EMS or other technologies. Regulation shall ideally provide a framework that allows innovation and that does not create complexity. Right now, my personal opinion is that our market design is way too complex. In my opinion, we might not even need subsidies for renewables, for energy management system, for new technology in general, if we simplify the regulatory framework, if we allow new business models. And I mean, there is a very interesting example of the telecommunication industries. If we just look at our grid tariffs, the way they are structured in telecoms, we are charged by bandwidth and not by data. If we do a similar approach in our industry, and we charge for capacity and not for the electrons that you take out of the grid, then that will foster dramatic innovation. There will be new business models everywhere. People can share energy free of charge across our grid. You can charge or discharge your battery, which is always a big issue on the regulatory side. And that means that you can better support the market on the one hand side, the grid on the other side. And as well socially, I think it would be quite interesting, because there is as well a debate whether people who cannot afford solar PV on the rooftop are subsidizing solar PV owners, because they are paying as well the grid fee for solar PV owners that require high capacity in wintertime, so when the PV is not producing. So all of those things could be dramatically simplified, knowing obviously that changing the regulatory framework always takes a long time. That's unfortunately not done quickly, but generally it would trigger a lot of innovations, and then suddenly you don't need subsidies, and there will be so much innovation, so many new business models, and the energy management system is the brain for all of that.
Thanks, Christian. And talking about regulation, Tobias, the 14A paragraph of the Renewable Energy Directive in Germany is a very hot topic at the moment. Do you think this will help aid smart energy management?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic, because as also Rod and Christian pointed out, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in simplifying market design and creating incentives. And so 14A or developments like 14A in general are can be a good thing, because we need to make also people more able and also incentivized, yeah, to adapt their power consumption to prices or to availability, etc. The challenge with 14A I see a little bit, especially in Germany, is that it meets German customers in a time where there's been a long debate on heating systems, also on renewables, etc., over the last couple of months in Germany. So it will be really key to get it right, and also to use the opportunity of 14A to bring customers to bring products to customers that really take away the edge of feeling, okay, there's something imposed on me by 14A, by limiting power consumption in that case. Because it has the potential really to move us into the new normal of that it's not a bad thing that we also adjust our power consumption, that we have intelligent systems, especially energy management systems, helping us doing so, to not only benefit ourselves, but also stabilize the grid, and also distribute renewables better across the grid. The good thing is that with 14A, there's the incentive of reduced grid fees. So this can also, again, if a product is designed right around it, this can also be an incentive that is then going to the customer. But key is really that all the market players now think about how can we make it really simple and value focused in terms of how we bring it to the customers. So and here energy management systems can play a key role, because what we've discussed and also tested is that energy management systems can take away also a little bit of the pain of 14A, which is about curtailment of energy or limiting power consumption by a DSO signal for a certain amount of time. For example, by just shifting the charging of the EV for a couple of hours, yeah, which usually doesn't hurt you much if it's done right, yeah, if it's charged just a couple of hours later in the evening, to minimize the impact of the DSO curtailment, for example. And if you even combine 14A with dynamic tariffs, what we see some players also planning on the market, this can be a really powerful product in the end that gets also then becomes also attractive for end customers, and can point us in the right direction of making them a new normal of having this kind of mechanisms on the market as well. Yeah? But I'd rather prefer incentives than regulation in that case. Yeah?
Okay, interesting. We can dive into that more in a second. Speaking about regulation, Henrik, we often say that the Nordics are kind of front runners in a lot of these energy management spaces, or kind of future technology. Do you think regulation in the Nordics aided this, or do you think it played an important role?
Definitely. I think in the Nordics, when it comes to especially the infrastructure, there's been several good things that has been done. I think also, for instance, smart meters, right? Rolling out that very early. And then there's a lot of things that has been done there. That's really helped along the way. But I think also it's at the end of the day we need to have a consistency across markets, across Europe, and across larger areas as well. So I think we're all in this together.
Thanks, Henrik. And Christian, what do you think about Tobias's last statement of preferring incentives over regulation? Do you feel the same?
Sorry, could you repeat, Jess?
Tobias mentioned at the end there that he prefers incentives over regulatory requirements like the 14A. Do you agree that incentives are an effective tool?
It's always better because it's a market-driven approach if you provide certain incentives. Again, I mean, I think I said it in my last statement. I personally believe it's not so much about having enough regulations in place or enough incentives in place. It's about reducing the hurdles for implementing new business models. And I think in our industry, unfortunately, we still have too many hurdles on the regulatory side. If we manage to really lower them dramatically, then this would give a big push.
Thanks, Christian. And talking about regulatory hurdles, Rod, in your experience, how difficult is it to adapt an EMS to the regulatory requirements of different markets? And how important is kind of adaptable technology in overcoming these?
Well, I think I'd probably flip that around a bit in that almost all EMSs are inherently software derived. And so we can very quickly generate a change. In a number of markets, you can see that an opportunity is created. Say that you've got a couple of thousand participants using the EMS. You can create a new capability in a couple of weeks that wasn't envisaged. And so you end up driving the regulatory environment. As soon as the regulatory environment has changed, you can then embody that capability. One of the things that we're doing is that we have a presence in Australia, we have a presence in Europe, we have a presence in the US. We can see a behavior that gains traction in one area, particularly in Australia and the US, where the legal framework for regulation is somewhat more benign. You can roll out a capability and then demonstrate that it works, that consumers benefit, that the grid benefits. And then you've got your documented real-world evidence, which is really what the regulators are looking for.
And Henrik, can you describe some of the challenges in rolling out a new market, an EMS solution, both within Europe and then also between Europe and the US?
Yeah, so I think a very important part of it that's been touched upon several times already is price signals, right? So price signals are absolutely necessary input to a energy management system. And in many markets, we're lacking reliable and good price signals, or they're difficult to get exposure to. So this is in terms of actually kind of knowing how to manage the energy consumption. There's little standardization across the markets, making, as I mentioned earlier, like a large-scale implementation difficult. So I'd say price signals is really one. And another one is interoperability. So being able to connect to and reliably control an energy device is something that's extremely difficult, extremely complex, with a lot of variation. And that's, of course, something we are working very hard to solve.
Thanks, Henrik. Interoperability is definitely a topic that's come up a lot in the sessions over the last 2 days. Tobias, can you tell me a bit about some of the most important factors that need to be considered to enable real interoperability?
Yeah, a very important topic, Greta, because it gets more important every day. To make all these use cases and all the topics also we touched upon happen in a perfect world, we need to be able for data to flow end to end. So from the residential or the commercial building all the way to the network operation centers and back. and that ideally also in quite a short amount of time, and ideally also in seconds. And the reality to make that happen looks very different today. You have missing standards, or sometimes also not sufficient standards that for us as a EMS company lead to like thousands of variations across different OEMs. If you think heat pump, wall box, inverter, and so on. Also variations within OEMs across different models, and if you then also take firmware versions into account, which can also alter behavior, a lot of variations to deal with. So, but we do see a very, very positive development in general. So many OEMs are stepping up their software and interface game there, and also with the with the number of setups out there, many of them multi-OEM setups. If you think of homeowners, for example, who have usually wall box from a different OEM than their PV, for example. The openness to closer collaboration, also to interfacing with each other, is increasing, which we appreciate a lot. Yeah? But I think the interoperability in terms of devices talking to each other and EMS and devices talking to each other is only one step, because big part of the energy transition is also how can we make the rollout and also the installation of assets smoother. And there, the reality we see today is that many installers still need to manually configure certain protocols, to make devices really talk to each other and activate certain communication interfaces. So the question of discovery, how can an EMS, for example, see what kind of assets are installed in a home, and also the question of configuration. So how to make all the devices also and assets talk to each other in the right way. Is for us a super important next step in the discussion to increase interoperability. So there are lots of opportunities out there, and some standards are evolving, but it could be faster, but we're on the right path.
Thanks, Tobias. Christian, would you add anything there about the important aspects of interoperability, both in terms of technology, standards, and also regulation?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I'm a big fan of interoperability, but there are two camps. One is the manufacturers that are defending their proprietary implementations, and they believe that they have an advantage because others cannot use their devices with the same functionality as they can do with their own applications. The other camp is pushing for interoperability. So it's still a moving target. As Tobias said, we are not there yet. Whether regulation can support that or not, that's a difficult question. I mean, if we take the example of heat pumps that was already mentioned, in Germany, subsidies for heat pumps are linked to the capability of a heat pump to support smart grid ready as a standard. That led to a very high penetration of smart grid ready. So more than 95% of the installations of heat pumps in the German market and in some other European markets are supporting smart grid ready those days, which is good. On the other side, smart grid ready is not a super advanced standard. It's essentially the smallest common denominator. So that's the disadvantage if regulation is pushing for standards. The other problem with regulation is that regulation is typically focused on national regulation. Whereas if we look at all of those devices, heat pump manufacturers, EV charger manufacturers, HVAC manufacturers, those are all international players. If we look at the software providers, EMS providers, those are all typically international players. So this is why I have my doubts. I'm quite skeptical that regulation can push standards. In the end, it will take some time. It might even be the case that large tech players like Apple, Google, Amazon, Samsung, and the likes are creating de facto standards like what they've done in the smart home space. That doesn't exist yet in the energy management space. That might come up. It's a matter of market power in the end. Today, that's not yet available. But I don't think regulation will push standards going forward. It's more a market-driven topic that interoperability beats proprietary implementations.
Thanks, Christian. And Rod, do you agree with what Christian just said there about big tech maybe creating de facto standards?
Yeah, I mean, if I ripple back to my old industry, aerospace, one of the things we saw was that imposed standards often lead to a very stale ecosystem. So manufacturers coming in with cutting edge solutions, kind of you end up with a winner takes most situation, where, for example, we might see that Amazon or Apple offer a very compelling API to interface with to reach out to the consumer. That would be quite distinct from how you would reach down to the individual devices, where you'll find that there may be detailed functionality that an EV manufacturer has or a wall box manufacturer has that there's no particular interest from the big tech guys in absorbing it. If there was a winning solution, they would absorb it. I think in our space, and I think us and Enode are in a very similar position where being agile to what the market players are doing is probably a better solution than seeking a standard interface for interoperability. Better to mandate that those interfaces are open and published so that we can ride on top of whatever functionality is popular.
Henrik, would you agree with that being agile is very key here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's it's so hard to predict how this is going to play out, so that we really have to take it step by step. But I think the important thing is that kind of looking at the bigger picture, I think all the OEMs, everyone involved in this are kind of moving towards the same goal here. We really want to have a well-functioning energy system that can tackle a lot of intermittent generation, and we're going to figure out a way to solve this. And so yes, agility is absolutely crucial.
Okay. And speaking of agility, we just had a whole session about time of use tariffs, so obviously a big topic. But Henrik, what are some of the major challenges of kind of integrating dynamic pricing in the wider scope of an energy management system?
Yeah, so I think first of all you need to have dynamic pricing, right? And in order to have dynamic pricing, you need smart meters. So in Norway, dynamic pricing has been the norm for many years, and it's also one of the first countries to roll those out, right? And if you're not able to measure consumption every hour or less, it's very hard to have a dynamic tariff or dynamic consumer tariff. So I think it's a little bit surprising that it's taking so much time to roll out in many countries. Should be very much at the top of the list, priority list for in many markets. A very crucial piece of infrastructure for the energy transition. So I'd say that's an important one to get done as soon as possible. Another part of it is also that the consumer, or I guess the consumer education part of it. So like consumers actually understanding how electricity prices fluctuate and why it's important to be exposed to them. And of course also that it's likely to be better for your wallet. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of people or consumers generally understanding why it's a good thing. And I think once you have the consumer demand, there will always also be a lot of energy providers offering those kind of products in the market.
Tobias, do you agree that dynamic tariffs should be at the top of the list, on the priority list?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a great incentive. And we see that even without an EMS, which is for me a very strong indicator, even without an EMS, people are willing to change their behavior based on dynamic pricing. And I think we just have to be aware that dynamic prices are unfortunately, again, local regulation, not the same across Europe. So dynamic pricing in Italy is different than in Sweden and in Germany. Also here simplifying regulation and moving into at least a European approach to dynamic prices would benefit the adoption, also the industry a lot.
Thanks, Tobias. And moving on to another very important topic, particularly when we're talking about interoperability, IoT solutions, that often opens up a little bit more vulnerability to cybersecurity attacks. Tobias, how can we make sure that energy, a critical industry, as it has so many links to other industries, can stay really, really cyber secure in this age of IoT and kind of digitalization?
Yeah, that's a super important point, Greta. And the energy industry is used to operating quite complex and also high-scale systems for today already. I have seen a change of mindset also over the last years, because parts of the energy industry can be quite traditional, if I may say so, yeah, in terms of IT and also technologies. But over the last couple of years, I've seen that the majority of companies sees the benefit of adopting newer technologies, for example, like especially cloud, to also stay ahead of the curve when it comes to security, especially if we compare it to the old ways of having your own data center, which is like in today's world almost impossible or very, very expensive to maintain and to keep secure. Cybersecurity and is a continuous effort, though, and I think following and combining also different approaches, like in a Swiss cheese model approach, where you have different layers of protection, like also moving to zero trust architectures, thinking very hard about how can you also secure your APIs, how can you also do continuous pen testing, and very important not to forget the human factor. Yeah. Security awareness is super important within the industry, but also to facilitate that with consumers. That's combining that can really increase the resilience and also the protection against cyber threats significantly. So there are a couple of measures, technical measures, but also let's not forget about the users and education of users in terms of security.
Thanks, Tobias. And Rod, could you add anything there on the importance of cybersecurity and maybe draw any parallels or differences to other industries such as aerospace or other fields that you've worked in?
So it's really interesting. My journey from aerospace to energy actually came from cyber. The Russian attacks on the Ukrainian grid in 2014 were really the thing that sparked the application of the distributed intelligence model I was working. So the key thing that comes from defense is every defense can be breached. So regardless of how strong you build your protections, you have to build the ability to be resilient to whatever the attack is. And to Tobias's point, the human factor matters, but, and this is a little bit of anti-intuitive, that humans augmented by local cyber or local IT are probably a more resilient solution than a highly central system. Because if one looks at how many of the attack vectors happen, it's about compromising communications, it's about sending bad messages or confusing messages. And so it's a lot of reasoning, once the system is penetrated, a lot of reasoning about, does this message make sense? So one is always protecting information as much as possible, but in terms of cyber, for the grid, the really critical thing is that you're limiting the potential actions of a potential threat to something that's comparatively manageable by the system. So that's really a good lesson from the defense space.
Thanks, Rod. Christian or Henrik, do you want to add anything to the cybersecurity discussion?
I mean, this is becoming obviously more and more important because the more connectivity we have, and we need connectivity to manage our system, the higher the vulnerability in our system. But generally, what Rod said is true. I mean, we are working towards a distributed system. A distributed architecture is more resilient than a centralized architecture in terms of attacks, and even if you are attacked, there is more possibilities to maintain the system stability, and this is why we are heavily pushing for such kind of distributed architectures to be in place with various layers of security on top. I mean, we as a company, we have around 3.5 million customer sites connected to our software platforms. So we have really a super high focus on everything around security, and especially those days. So I would say it's at least as much effort as we are investing into developing new products, we are investing into cybersecurity those days.
Yeah, also adding to that, I'd say another important aspect is the security of the consumer data, right? So like we also really want to make sure that we're protecting the consumer here and making sure that their data is not leaked or exposed in unwanted ways.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had another question from the audience. Someone has asked, do you think future EMS will involve much human-machine collaboration? Maybe Rod, do you want to try and take this one?
Yeah, so very much, I mean, that's our general direction. If you think about dynamic pricing, for example, and smart meters, why is there not a significant uptake? And a large portion of the population are highly skeptical. They don't have the intent, the desire to engage in energy thinking. So why would they ever engage in an energy management system? This 100% fits into the model of cognitive augmentation. So using the EMS as a decision aid to the user to, let's say, energy retailers offer better products. Because outside of the sphere of the people in the energy sector, nobody cares about energy. They just care about what their monthly bill is. So what's the really interesting opportunity is to use AI in the HEMS space to key into what the user is trying to achieve, be that a charged car, a comfortable house, or clean clothes for the kids on time, and using the AI to support that reasoning within the grid context.
Do you think, when you said consumers really only care about their energy bill, Tobias, do you think there's other elements too? Do you think users want more control?
I think in the end it's about, for most consumers, also what we've seen from market research is about saving money. And the majority of consumers, and that's my personal belief. Yeah, we still need to see that out in the field. But what we can see from research, from user research, and also from market research is that they would be totally happy with just getting like an automated message. We saved you a couple of $100 each month, yeah, by automatically optimizing everything in the background without compromising comfort. That would be the best situation, yeah. So you don't notice anything and you still save money. So that would be the best EMS around, and you maybe get a push notification from time to time that everything's working fine. So I think that's the key driver. What we still have around today are, of course, users from the innovator space. If you think of the adoption curve, yeah, the very early users, they are usually a lot more interested into what is happening. And they have quite loud voices today, yeah, also requesting features or driving discussions. But I believe those users are super important to kick things off, but they do not represent the majority of users we need to address to make the energy transition work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tobias. And in our last few minutes, I want to ask each of you, aside from, human-machine collaboration, what do you expect in this space in the future, and what are you kind of most looking forward to? Maybe Henrik, starting with you.
Sure. So looping back into what we talked about earlier, interoperability, I'm super excited about that, and the ability to seamlessly and reliably connect and integrate to any distributed energy device. But it's also about interoperability when it comes to the energy system and energy markets and making price signals more accessible. So I think at the end of the day, this will reduce the barriers to innovation, which is super important if we're going to overcome the challenges that we're facing. So I think looking at a parallel to the open banking movement that unleashed a wave of innovation in the financial sector, I think we can create a similar and much more impactful movement with open energy. And that's something I'm super excited about.
Thanks, Henrik. Christian, what about you?
I think it's a human element. If I look back when I started in the energy industry, and that was a long time ago, unfortunately, when Europe was about to start market liberalization, and not many young people were thinking about working in this old-fashioned industry. That was really some time ago. And nowadays, if you look at it, it's really the entire package that is exciting. It's an industry that is key to save our planet. It involves a lot of high tech. We are talking about AI everywhere. Therefore, what really excites me is that I'm convinced that many young people are keen to participate and thrive in the energy transition and are really keen to work in our industry.
Thanks, Christian. Rod, what about you?
Well, I guess the first thing would be energy retailers actually adapting their product offerings so that that dynamic pricing in one way or other is exposed to consumers. The other thing is the cross-domain application, so that as the home becomes smarter and becomes coupled to the grid, we're facing a tremendous revolution in AI, in home robotics, all kinds of aspects like that, and the ability to cross domains and link all those together is probably a profound change in the next decade.
And Tobias?
I think for me, it's also the things that have been mentioned already, but especially that we have a lot of technology and also concepts at hand to really create value stacking of different optimizations for the end user benefit, and at the same time connect local optimization with market optimization with grid optimization, which is really a first, I think, in the industry, that we can think about it, all unbundling, etc. Of course, taken into account, but this can really create new products across the value chain and can really drive the energy transition a lot faster than it's been over the last couple of years. And that's, I think, what I'd be very much looking forward to.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this session and sadly to the end of gridXdays 2023. So thank you to the four of you for joining us today, taking the time out to chat about these really important and exciting issues.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks
Have
so
a great
much.
afternoon. And Tobias is going to stick around for some parting words. Tobias, what is your kind of key takeaway from the last 2 days, and what have you been kind of surprised about, or what do you think people have really been reiterating in the sessions?
Yeah, first of all, Greta, it's been really 2 really exciting days filled with a lot of very, very cool and insightful discussions. So I really enjoyed it. If you didn't have the chance to tap into all of the session, make sure to check out the recordings that we will make available soon. I think 4 things I took away. So many of the discussions shared the sentiment of that we are on the right track and that we are advancing in the energy transition, which is really good news, and progress is being made. So I think that's excellent. And also something we just touched upon in our last discussion, flexibility being a key driver of that, and that we need to embed flexibility across the full energy system chain. So not only flexibility at home, but also in the grid and also towards markets. That was really exciting to see and to discuss about. And last but not least, it all only can happen if there's also integration, interoperability. So this needs to happen on different levels between market players, different industries, but also the devices and assets being used for flexibility and for energy management, for example. And the last thing is really like an overarching one that we see, and I think the gridXdays contributed to that, hopefully, which is education and talking about it, and making sure that that we discuss these topics and that we also share the knowledge and make sure everybody's also aware of what is happening, what are the opportunities out there. And that was really exciting to see that all of the speakers joining us over the last 2 days really contributed to that. And let's continue to do so as an industry then over the coming months and years.
Thanks so much, Tobias. Very strong parting words. Yeah, I think I fully agree with your takeaways. And I would also say, I think we touched on it a lot in the last session. We're kind of in this really interesting process of moving from the early adopters to the mainstream. And we need to have the technology and the holistic solutions that cater to the mainstream market and, educate people, integrate solutions to ensure that we reach widespread adoption. So on that note, thank you, Tobias, firstly, and thank you to all of the speakers that joined us over the last 2 days, 13 sessions, 45 speakers. And then, of course, a huge thank you to everyone who watched the sessions, who asked questions, took part, shared on social media and things like that. That's what it's all about. So we love to see this great collaboration between everyone. And as Tobias said, all of the recordings we'll be posting on YouTube and uploading the links in the coming weeks on LinkedIn. So be sure to follow us, keep updated, and tell your friends about all of the sessions. And let's keep going in this right direction, as you said, Tobias.
Thanks, Greta.
Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.